Hi, I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, and I'm based here in beautiful, sunny Southwest Florida. And this is the Sony A7R Mark III. Now, I recognize that I'm a little bit late to the game with talking about this specific camera, and this is not going to be my standard review, as there are already hundreds of reviews out there on the A7R Mark III. What more could I possibly say that hasn't already been said? It's kind of a given that the A7R III has amazing video and amazing image quality. It's been pixel peeped to death by virtually every YouTuber with any notoriety at all. And the conclusions are mostly the same, gushing, unbridled enthusiasm for the camera. But this review isn't aimed at those people looking to reaffirm their reasons for purchasing the A7R Mark III. On the contrary, this video is for those who, like me, have long been on the fence and not all that convinced about Sony camera bodies. People who are like me in that they're pretty much married to their legacy DSLR systems from both Canon and Nikon. Because, as you probably know, changing systems is really kind of a big deal that no one should ever take all that lightly. Now, that said, I'm going to attempt to give my opinions on this camera without being under the influence of a free trip to Arizona, complete with hot air balloon and helicopter rides through the mountain ranges of the US desert Southwest. Okay, I admit it, maybe I'm just a little bit jealous that Sony didn't invite yours truly to Arizona to try out the new A7R Mark III when it was introduced late last year. But can you really blame Sony? I mean, I certainly don't, because if you've been a long-time sub, then you know I've never really been a big fan of the Sony A7 line of cameras. I love their lenses, I love their sensors, and the video and image quality that they are capable of producing. I think it's just amazing. But that's never really been the problem with the A7s for me. The problems were limited to virtually everything else about the cameras. I mean, everything from poor ergonomics to single card slot, poor battery life, overheating, to bad menus, etc. But, in spite of all that, there's about a 99.99% chance that I'm going to buy the A7R Mark III. Now, let me tell you the top 5 reasons why. Number 5, more native lenses. It's taken a while, but Sony now has most bases for most photographers covered with their lens selection. The 3 major zoom pillars are now covered: 16 to 35, 24 to 70, and 70 to 200, all with wide f2.8 apertures in their G Master line of lenses. Now, if you happen to be a prime shooter like me, they now have most of that covered too. 28 f1.8, the amazing 35 f1.4, 50mm 1.8 and 1.4, of course the 85 f1.4 and the 85 f1.8, in addition to a couple of others like the 90 and the 100. They're all pretty amazing. And the only real gap now is tilt shift or perspective control lenses. The downside of Sony lenses is that similar lenses of similar focal lengths and apertures from other manufacturers of legacy DSLR cameras are considerably less expensive than equivalent Sonys. So if you're going to make a switch over to Sony, just know that going in. Number 4, autofocus has been radically improved, especially when compared to previous A7 cameras in my experience. I like to use point autofocus, and point autofocus on previous A7s hunted a lot. At times it would hunt mercilessly. However, with the Mark III cameras, simply put, autofocus is much more decisive, so much more consistent, and much faster to lock onto your subject decisively, and most important, accurately. And subject tracking is now a wonderful experience too. Of course, there's also this thing called IAF, which is nothing short of incredible, and man, is it ever astoundingly accurate. Number 3, better buttons and improved ergonomics. The previous A7's buttons were mushy and not all that tactile, especially the video record button, which was recessed and at times felt like you needed a paperclip or a pen to dig in there and activate it. Very frustrating experience. To me, one of the best features of the new Sony A7 bodies is the joystick and the touchscreen to move the focus point around. Sony finally listened to schmoes like me who prefer point focus. Yeah, I know IAF is awesome, and I know the other focusing modes on the latest Sony bodies are great too. I mean, I totally get that. But if you're coming from a DSLR and want to get going right away with Sony, you might find yourself reverting to a DSLR method of shooting and focusing, and now the A7R Mark III can handle point focus with aplomb, and that's a great thing. Now on the flip side, yes, the ergonomics and the shooting experience are definitely way better, but they're still not perfect. For example, I like to use back button autofocus, and the AF on button on the back here is the most logical button to use for back button autofocus. But unfortunately, it's set very close to the video record button, and on more than one occasion, I ended up pressing the video record button by mistake. I missed my shot and instead got a brief 1-second video. Anyway, you learn over time where to put your fingers, but I still make that mistake. The other major downside or ergonomic nit that I have is the screen. It still doesn't flip out, and to me it's really flimsy and fragile. All in though, the ergonomics are still a vast improvement. Number 2, dual card slots. In my opinion, dual card slots are an absolute must, especially for wedding photographers. That's huge, because there's really nothing else to say other than there's simply no need to risk your wedding photography career with a camera that only has one memory card slot. Today, there's practically no excuses, none. But up until now, the A7s were single memory card slot cameras. And for me, that's a no-no in my wedding work. But now, Sony listened and there are 2 card slots. Thank you. Which of course leads us to number 1. Number 1 is battery life. The previous version of Sony camera batteries were, to put it mildly, an embarrassment. To even attempt to claim otherwise with these ridiculous ideas of turning on airplane mode or turning off the camera when you weren't using it, etc. I mean, you can't be serious. As photographers and videographers, we need to be aware of battery life, but it should never be a distraction, and certainly never this much of a distraction, ever. I used to bring 5 or 6 batteries with me when I was shooting with the A7S or the A7 Mark II. Now, I've talked to other photographers and videographers who told me that they were carrying between 8 and 12 batteries with them for a full day's shoot. That's something short of absurd, which is exactly why I stopped or rarely used my A7 cameras. Now, just to drive this point home, I've been recording this video on the A7 Mark II, and the camera has been on for maybe 30, maybe 40 minutes, and I've turned it on and off between each segment, and I'm already down to 54%. That's crazy. It's also why I'm so pleased to tell you that the newest Sony battery is so dramatically improved that I no longer even notice battery life. And if you get the battery grip, then you'll likely not run out of battery for the entire day or possibly even 2 full days of shooting. It's that good. I mean, it's awesome. Can't begin to express how important this is and how much it changes the experience of working with the A7 camera. It's a huge relief, and to me, the single most welcome change to the entire A7 system. So there you have it. With most of my personal nits gone, now I'm ready to bring the A7R Mark III and likely the A7 Mark III into my workflow. So you can expect more Sony videos from me in the future. I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, based here in beautiful, sunny Southwest Florida. If you like these videos, please give me a like, or better yet, subscribe. And until the next time, happy shooting.